next topic I'd like to discuss is giving you a brief overview of generative augmented intelligence, or what we like to call AI+, and compare and contrast it with generative artificial intelligence. And I think this is a very important distinction to make as we think about the future of these technologies and how we will use them as students, as teachers, as members of society, as professionals, and so on. So the key theme here, the buzzword is augmented, not artificial, supplement, not supplant. So how are we going to go about leveraging the technology to work with us more effectively rather than putting us all out of a job? So one of the things to notice, and you've no doubt already observed this, the barrier to entry for applying generative AI is very, very low. You can get ChatGPT, you can get Bard, you can get Claude, you can get all kinds of stuff. It's really easy to do. And in fact, for basically the cost of several expensive pumpkin spice lattes at Starbucks, you can use the advanced versions of most of these tools. 20 bucks a month, 40 bucks a month, whatever they're charging now. That's not very expensive in the grand scheme of things. However, as you've also no doubt noticed if you've used these tools for any length of time, generative AI tools are not yet flawless, and they often do weird things. That's called hallucinate. And one of the things that's happened is a lot of professionals, people who are my peers in the field, have begun to look at this and make observations. And their observations are often something like this. I've noticed a certain style to many ChatGPT documents I have read. Most of what it tells you seems like you've already heard it somewhere. No radical departures from what others have already said. Frequent excursions into nonsense. Speaks with great authority, even when outputting nonsense, and so on and so forth. And there's no question that it's possible to do that. However, what typically has been happening is people will start trying to use these tools without really taking any time to learn how to use them effectively. For example, they haven't learned how to use prompt engineering effectively. And they also use the tools in the wrong way. And then they get results that don't satisfy whatever their expectations were. And they throw up their hands in despair or delight, depending on their perspective. And they say, see, the emperor has no clothes. These tools suck. Humans are smarter than computers. End of story. I think that is a very disingenuous and a very incorrect way to look at what's happening. In fact, I've coined the term degenerative AI to characterize people who do a very superficial job of evaluating generative AI and then deciding it's not any good. Because I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks, it's usually my fault when I don't get the answers that I expect or that I would want to get. I should also note that one of the funny things here, if you read some of the quotes from this article, a lot of this sounds like the experience many faculty have with first semester graduate students. Someone who shows up in your lab, doesn't really have any experience. Most of what they tell you seems like you've heard it before. There's often no radical departures from what others have already said because they're still learning. They frequently say nonsensical things. But what do? Do we expect our first semester graduate students to go out there and write our grant proposals for us to very competitive solicitations? Do we expect our first semester graduate students to go out there and do publications in Nature and Science and all other kinds of very highly selective and highly competitive conferences and journals? Of course not. What we expect them to do, and what we do, is we work with them to help train them so they can become more effective. And that's a better paradigm to think about here. So, in my experience, which is all about 8 months old at this point, we're much better off when we think of AI not as artificial intelligence, like artificial sweetener, but more like augmented intelligence, a way to be more effective working together with people. So I thought it might be kind of fun to take a look at some examples of the differences between augmented intelligence and artificial intelligence. And if anybody here is a Star Trek fan, no better place to start than Locutus of Borg, which was Captain Picard's fate when he was abducted by the Borg. And they gave him some implants to augment him. Hopefully, we'll end up like him and be able to survive this experiment. So one nice difference is that artificial intelligence we would expect it to be able to generate new content flawlessly without people in the loop. Whereas augmented intelligence involves collaboration between the AI systems and humans. What's a nice example of this? Healthcare. It would probably be premature for quite some time and for all kinds of legal and liability reasons to expect a generative AI system to be able to perfectly diagnose everything that comes along that you might throw at it if you were a doctor or a nurse. However, if you're a doctor and a nurse, you might be able to use those technologies as a decision support aid to get feedback. You say, here's the symptoms I'm seeing. tell me and here's my candidate diagnosis, tell me what I might be missing, tell me what else I should think about. And if you can turn around the paradigm through prompt engineering techniques like the persona pattern, you can start getting new insights to questions to ask that you might not have had experience with because you're often limited by your background as a human, whereas a tool may have a broader view. Not to say that you would always listen to it and make decisions without consulting with other humans, but it provides a very nice way to give you a new perspective or perspective. I think that's a great example of what we're going to be seeing very soon. Another example, artificial intelligence would try to mimic human creativity and artistry without the human, whereas augmented intelligence would provide tools to make us able to do things in new and creative ways. So once again, my deep fakes example from Brian Monarch. If you really haven't lived until you've heard Arnold Schwarzenegger sing "The Hills Are Alive" with the Sound of Music, with his face superimposed over Julie Andrews. Exactly. And it actually sounds pretty much like that. There's also a great one. You guys may not be old enough to remember this, but there was a character in the 70s and 80s called Mr. Rogers. And most people who are my age grew up watching Mr. Rogers. And so they have a great Mr. Rogers with Arnold Schwarzenegger being Mr. Rogers and singing some Mr. Rogers songs. So great stuff. This person has obviously mastered tools to be able to be very creative in ways you probably couldn't possibly do without those tools. Other examples, trying to figure out how to create content that's refined and contextualized. So oftentimes AI left to its own devices will not be able to give you very refined stuff, which is people's observations when they use things like ChatGPT in a naive or ineffective way. But what you really want to do is combine computers with people to be able to be more refined. So here's an example. I don't know anybody here, but my son likes to listen to Spotify. They have an AI DJ that keeps track of what you like, the kind of music you listen to. And then, of course, it will try to suggest things to you. And it's really funny listening to the AI DJ try to get you all pumped up to try to listen to some new songs and things like that. Sometimes it's wildly off base, but the great part is when you downvote it by skipping through the song, it learns, so the next time it does a better job of suggesting things you actually like. Great example of people and computers working together to give more refined and contextualized output that's based on your interests. Another good differentiation is in artificial intelligence, we expect the AI system to be creative, whereas in augmented intelligence, the human remains the creative force. No better example of this, for my money, than pair programming, for those of you who program, with your AI chat buddy. And I do this a lot nowadays for all kinds of things, when I'm creating examples for my class, when I'm writing programming assignments, when I'm doing things that I do for consulting opportunities and so on. I'm leveraging the power of coding assistant tools like the GitHub Copilot or the Amazon Code Whisperer and so on. And there's probably about a dozen of these. You can take a look at a bunch of them here. And you can use them to pair with yourself and give you insights that might otherwise be lost if you didn't have that buddy kind of looking over your shoulder and helping to give you different perspectives on things. So once again, the human is in the driver's seat, but you're leveraging some entity that can help you think more effectively. Another thing, in the true AI world, we want to automate all the creative jobs. There's nothing left for us to do but basically survive on what do they call it, universal basic income. But a more effective way is to complement and support human creators. Now, this is a particularly interesting topic because that was the basis of the writers' strike and the Actors Guild strike and so on. But there's a lot of work now on how you can use AI in entertainment for filming and production and script writing, script refinement, also parts of the production process, certainly the parts that have to do with visual effects. AI is going to be heavily involved in that. And I have a feeling that if you're a student of pop culture, you probably have noticed over the past decade or so, the entertainment industry seems to have run out of new and creative ideas often. And so they end up doing the 16th version of the Fast and Furious movie. I don't know if you're a fan of Fast and Furious, but when the 16th version came out, it was getting a little old. So wouldn't it be great if we could have some new and different ways of thinking outside the box? Because people don't seem to be cutting it for a whole bunch of reasons. Or Indiana Jones 75 or whatever. So it would be nice if we could use these techniques to kind of jolt people out of their inertia and think creatively to go back and doing more interesting things the way it used to be done. I know I sound like an old timer when I say that, but I think there's a difference nowadays. And then one other thing that's worth pointing out here, which is very relevant to what we're talking about, is the risks that are very real of inauthentic content, inauthentic output, biases because this stuff is trained on human context, human text, human videos, human speech, which have all the biases that humans bring with it, and a whole slew of ethical issues as well. So once again, the point is not that we're going to just take this stuff out of the box and believe it, not listening to Abraham Lincoln and his statements about don't trust everything you read on the internet, but we can involve humans for oversight. And as a good example of this, I'm actually working with some colleagues on a precision mental health app and platform that's designed to help kids deal with the issues that they face in their lives. So think kids maybe 8 to 14, 15 or so on. And unlike YouTube or TikTok, which has algorithms whose main point is to titillate you and try to convince you to buy content or buy products and so on, the idea here is to feed things to people that will help them with whatever issues they're wrestling with. So it could be bullying, it could be depression, it could be sibling rivalry, whatever it is. And so this is a good way of doing this, but when we do this system, we don't just let content fly out without having a human who's trained in behavioral mental health and social emotional learning vet it first before we unleash it on people who are going to have to use it. So again, guidance is crucially important for this to be successful. All right, so that's a quick overview of augmented intelligence. So hopefully I've convinced you that the goal of a lot of this stuff is not to make us irrelevant, it's to make us more productive. Think of an exoskeleton for your brain, so you're more productive and able to think things through more effectively.